Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's workshop focused on the housing element. It's just 6 o'clock, so we're going to give just a moment or two to have people come in and join us. We really appreciate your participation tonight. We've had high registration, so we expect people to be joining us throughout the meeting, but we do really appreciate that you are here. And we also want to respect your time. And so we're going to get underway right now. My name's Joan Chaplick. I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's meeting. So before we get started, we want to make sure that everyone is aware that we do have translation available. You'll be able to participate in either English or Spanish tonight. And when we turn the interpretation on in the control bar, the interpretation globe will come up and you'll need to choose the language you prefer, whether it's English or Spanish. And now I would like to have our interpreter make the announcement in Spanish.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Esta noche estaremos en el taller de actualización de elementos de vivienda. Hemos recibido una alta registración. Bastantes personas están participando. Por lo tanto, vamos a dejar que entren mientras seguimos con el taller. Vamos a respetar su tiempo. Por lo tanto, vamos a empezar a tiempo para poder terminar este taller a tiempo. Mi nombre es Joan. Yo soy la moderadora, estaré a cargo de esta reunión. Esta reunión se va a transmitir tanto en inglés como en el español. En la barra de abajo, usted puede ver las indicaciones en la pantalla. Existe un globito, el dibujo de un globo en la parte posterior de la pantalla dentro de Zoom. Usted ahí puede escoger el idioma, ya quiere escuchar esto en español o en inglés. La interpretación se va a hacer simultánea. Usted va a estar escuchando lo mismo que están hablando en inglés inmediatamente al español. Gracias por permitirme servirle comunidad hispana. Thank you, Ms. Joanne.
Okay, thank you, Luis. So let's take a moment and go to the interpretation and choose your language. Okay, well, hopefully everyone is ready to participate. And now I would like to introduce Julian Zeiger, Senior Planner with Marin County. Jillian.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. We're here tonight to continue our conversation about the housing element. Most of our attention so far has been focused on the sites where we can plan to develop housing. But tonight we're going to talk about programs to consider including. And these are important because they respond to what we heard from the community during the needs assessment. And they basically act as a work program for us for the next 8 years. When a program is included, it commits the county to put resources towards this and act on it. The county must identify specific programs in its housing element that will allow it to implement the goal of providing housing at all income levels with a focus on households with lower incomes, and address our commitment to fair and equal housing by affirmatively furthering fair housing, which means to take meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity. Programs must include specific action steps that the county will take. Programs must also include a specific time frame for implementation. Some examples from our current housing element include increased tenant protections, engage in a countywide effort to address homeless needs, and review and consider updating parking standards. So tonight we are here to hear from you. What are your priorities for programs that should be addressed? I'd now like to introduce the team who is helping the county plan to meet these challenges. So tonight we have Lily Thomas, Deputy Director, Housing and Federal Grants, and Aline Tonellian, Planner in Housing and Federal Grants, and myself, Jillian Zeiger, Senior Planner, Housing and Federal Grants, and our consultant team, Veronica Tam with Veronica Tam and Associates, Joan Chaplick, and Scott Davidson, both principals at MIG, and Anna Padilla and Joey Nielsen, our support staff from MIG.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. So I want to do a quick preview of the agenda for how we'll be spending our time over the next 2 hours. Veronica Tam's going to give a quick update on the housing element, and then she's going to spend a little time focusing on the role and purpose of the policies and programs in the housing element. She's going to do a review of the needs assessment, and from that, identify the main program topics that we are considering for programs to include. And then we're going to solicit your input on the program ideas. So we have a lot of material to get through today. In terms of our goals, our goal is to inform you. So to make sure you understand the policies and their role in the housing element, provide you an opportunity to give your input, and the desired outcome of this meeting is that based on the feedback we get tonight, that the county has direction on the programs that should be further developed. So in terms of our ground rules, please respect each other's opinions. We expect to hear multiple viewpoints. In the chat, please keep it civil and respectful. We are going to be going through things topically. So it's most helpful when you provide input at the time that it's requested. And we do want to keep the focus on policies and programs. We know the last several meetings, there has been discussion about the housing sites, and many people have wanted to comment on that. If you have anything related to housing sites, we're not receiving that input at this meeting, but we would like to direct you to send it by email to the county. It will also be a major topic of the April 12th Board of Supervisors meeting, and we hope that you will be able to attend and participate there. Please comment from your own perspective, and we're relying on technology tonight. Along with Zoom, we're going to be using some other tools, so please be flexible and patient. In terms of Zoom, we've gotten you using the interpretation, and our focus will be on the chat. So we have a very full agenda, so we won't be taking verbal comments. So please submit your comments and questions using the chat. We're going to be doing some Zoom polling questions, the questions that we have asked at every meeting for consistency. As you have questions during the meeting, we have several county staff who will be responding back to you through the chat. So we'll be doing our best to get all the questions answered. At key points, we're going to specifically ask you for comments on program ideas, and then we're going to use Mentimeter, which we will demonstrate. Okay, so that's how you'll be able to participate. And so let's get started with some polling questions. So my colleague Joey is going to bring up the first polling question. So please tell us where you live. Do you live in unincorporated Marin County or one of the cities within Marin County, or are you from outside the county? So we want to move through these quickly. Very excited that our numbers keep climbing. And we have a good percentage of unincorporated county residents tonight. So Joey, let's share the results, and we can keep moving quickly through these questions. So as you can see, we have over 72% of the people are from unincorporated Marin County this evening. Okay, let's go to our second question. So, and this is for those of you who responded that you live in unincorporated Marin County. And Joey, if we could have our second polling question. Please tell us what part of the county you live in. So we have West Marin, unincorporated San Rafael, unincorporated Novato, unincorporated Southern Marin, unincorporated Central Marin, or you may be someone who doesn't live in the county. So we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to weigh in on the polling questions. And so how about if we close out polling question 2 and share those results? Okay, so we have great participation from West Marin this evening, but we do have representation from the other areas in the county. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's go to polling question number 3. So do you work in Marin County? So your choices are yes, no, or maybe you're someone who is retired, a student, unemployed. So let's just take a moment. This is our third question. We have a total of 6. Okay, and we're pretty close to having most people weigh in on the question. So let's share the results. Okay, so we just have 49% work in Marin County. And then we have a good number of people who are retired, unemployed, or do not work for other reasons. Okay, thank you. Let's go to polling question number 5. So how long have you lived in Marin County? So have you lived in the county less than a year? Maybe you're someone new, 1 to 5 years, between 5 and 10 plus years, or you're someone who doesn't live in the county. Okay, let's share the results to that question. And so we have great participation from residents here longer than 10 years, so 87%. And then 1 or 2 newbies, so just new to the area, and a few who've been here for less than 5 years. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's go to polling question number 5. Since we're talking about housing, it helps us to know what your housing situation is. So for our 5th polling question, please tell us your housing situation. Are you someone who owns their home? Do you rent your home? Are you someone who lives with family and friends where you don't own or rent? Or are you someone who doesn't have permanent housing? So let's just give a few more seconds for people to weigh in. And okay, so let's share the results to polling question 5. And you can see we have 81% are homeowners on tonight's meeting. Okay, and let's go to our final polling question. What's your age? Again, the polling's anonymous, but it does help us understand who we're reaching. It gives us an idea of some of the methods that are most successful. So in terms of age, okay, we have, let's just give it another second. And Joey, you can share the results to our final polling question. Okay, so more than half our senior population is well represented, but we have about 12% under 50. So, okay, it's good to know who is with us tonight. So thank you for participating in the polling, and that gives us a lot of information about who we're reaching. So with that, we are going to move on to our main presentation. Veronica Tam is going to present some information, and then we'll move into the part of the presentation where you will be asking you for comments. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions, drop them in the chat, and the Marin County staff are going to do their best to answer them. So Veronica, let's start with an overview of the housing element.
Sure. Just for those who have not been joining us in the last few workshops, I'm just going to give a really brief overview of what is the housing element. Housing element has to be updated every 8 years, unlike the rest of the general plan that may take a little longer time frame. The housing element is on some kind of a statutory deadline that we have to update it every 8 years. The housing element also has to be reviewed by a state agency for compliance with state law. The agency responsible for that is the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. We are working towards a deadline. As I mentioned before, there's a statutory deadline. We're working towards a deadline of December 2022. The one thing that we do have to mention and make sure people understand is every jurisdiction has to do its housing element. Every city in the county has to do its housing element. For the county's housing element, we only cover the unincorporated areas. So a lot of the land use policies, programs that you'll hear about tonight, they are only applicable to the unincorporated areas. Next slide. So when we send the housing element to the state for its review, there is the central piece of review is how much are you able to meet the regional housing needs allocation. For the unincorporated county, we have an allocation of 3,569 units. Essentially, this is a regional housing needs that's assigned to us through this whole process, starting from the state. The state determines how much housing is needed for the entire state, and it gives it to the regions throughout the state. For the Bay Area region, the allocation is 441,000 units, and then each county gets an allocation. The entire Marin County, including all the cities, got an allocation of 14,210 units. For the unincorporated areas, for the unincorporated county that's covered under this housing element, we are responsible, we're obligated to accommodate 3,569 units over the 8-year planning period. Next slide. So the housing element has also very prescribed content as set up in the state law. What we do need to do is a needs assessment, looking at the demographic and housing market conditions, how they influence the needs in the community. We're paying special attention to those who may need special needs, such as the senior, the disabled, and also the homeless, among other special needs groups. A kind of like a very important change in state law recently is the requirement to look at housing from the lens of affirmatively furthering fair housing. There are 5 different categories of analysis, and we have to look at how we are distributing the growth, the 3,569 units throughout the unincorporated areas, and how do we use meaningful actions to promote fair housing within the unincorporated areas. And another component of the housing element is, in fact, how are we going to accommodate the regional housing needs allocation? Where are the sites? And how are they related to different income levels? And particularly, what are we going to be able to facilitate growth within the county and incorporate the areas for all socioeconomic segments of the community? And finally, but not the most important piece of the housing element, all the programs and policies, which is a topic of tonight, we need to look at programs and policies that would increase the availability of housing units, that would facilitate affirmatively furthering fair housing, and to provide housing for the special populations. Next slide. So programs and policies are there. Within the housing element, there are some main goals of the programs and policies. We have to provide opportunities for a variety of housing choices to meet the really diverse needs of the county. And again, just to remind everybody, when we say the county, in the context of the housing element, we're talking about the unincorporated areas. We need to facilitate the development of housing, particularly housing that's affordable to those who are lower income. And we need to remove constraints to housing, focusing particularly on governmental constraints. We need to improve the conditions of existing housing, making sure that we provide quality housing and quality neighborhoods for our residents. Preserve existing affordable housing, recognizing that it's expensive to build affordable housing. So preserving what we currently have is important. And again, tying all this back to the whole affirmatively furthering fair housing lens, we need to promote fair housing within the unincorporated areas. Next slide. Now I'm just going to give a brief summary of the needs assessment. We've been working on the housing element. We've been conducting community outreach and also surveys. So there are some preliminary information that we can share with you all tonight. Next slide. Certainly, in the unincorporated areas, there are very limited housing options. The majority of the housing in the unincorporated areas, and even in Marin County, are single-family homes. 83% of our housing is just single-family homes. We do have an aging population. 22% of our residents are 65 and over. We have very limited vacancy for rent or for sale. Now we have a lot of vacant units that are, the majority of our vacant units are for seasonal uses. Whereas when we have vacant units, they're not really, there are not too many of them that are available for rent or for sale. About 20% of the households are cost burdened. These are households who spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And usually that would be considered cost burdened because you have less disposable income for other expenses. And on top of the 20% who are cost burdened, we have another 17% that are severely cost burdened. These are people who spend more than half of their income on housing. In terms of how overcrowding conditions, only less than 1% of the owner households are overcrowded, but more than 13% of the renter households are overcrowded. Overcrowded is defined as more than one person per room. Next slide. The county also conducted a survey between October and December last year, and there have been over 100 responses, both online and paper responses in English and Spanish. So here are some highlights of that survey. About 59% of the respondents selected increasing the amount of housing that's affordable to moderate and lower income households as the top kind of needs or choices in priorities in the unincorporated areas. 47% picked increasing home ownership opportunities for lower and moderate income residents, and also 33% of them identified creating programs to help existing homeowners to stay in their homes, meaning maybe dealing with rehabilitation or making the units to be accessible. Those are some of the ideas underneath that. So again, another findings from the survey is there is insufficient housing in my community. Particularly, a lot of the residents identified that it's insufficient housing that's affordable for lower income households, insufficient housing for families with children, and then insufficient housing for seniors and elderly that may want to age in place within the unincorporated areas. Next slide. In terms of focus group findings, the county has been conducting focus group meetings as well. A lot of the residents feel that they're stuck in the current housing because there are limited choices that they can move up or move down or trade down. And in terms, as we talked about, most of the units, there are not a lot of vacancy, but when they are being used as vacation or seasonal use. We also have a lot of residents or homeowners feel that they have to, if they want to find something that's within the price range, or they have to adjust to their economic situation, they pretty much have to leave the county. Affordability and cost of living is certainly an issue. Many also the comment we get is a lot of them are not particularly aware of what are the housing programs available to them. Next slide. In other findings from community-based organizations that are serving the lower income residents also identified that it's hard to find housing, limited stock because of vacation rentals. There are discriminatory practices by some landlords. Some housing stocks is in poor condition. There's a lack of public transportation and certainly long commutes to other counties for employment opportunities. There is the idea about this NIMBYism, people who are basically not necessarily supportive of affordable housing in their neighborhoods, and then lack of information and knowledge about city, county programs. Next slide.
Okay.
So now I'll pass it back to Joe.
Okay, well, thank you, Veronica. So that was a quick overview of the needs assessment and some of the community engagement findings that have informed this list of topics. And so what we're going to be doing for just about the remainder of the meeting is through the chat and another digital tool, getting your input on some program ideas in some different categories. So the first category of the topic is about programs and ideas that will help increase the availability of existing units. The second grouping of program ideas relate to helping the county achieve its goals for AFFH. Will be focused on tenant protection ideas and anti-displacement. There's also some programs and policies related to fair housing outreach and enforcement. They're required, so they are in existence. Programs and ideas related to housing choices, they're covered by the land use and development policies that the county has. And then there are some specific to neighborhood improvements, and those are dependent on a specific location. So we won't be talking about them tonight. Then we'll move to a group of program ideas that focus on special needs housing. So we'll be walking through some ideas to help support housing for seniors, farm workers, disabled persons, and people experiencing homelessness. Then we have a group of programs that are aligned with state law. And this will be an informational section of the presentation because they are required. So we want to make sure that you're aware of them, but they must appear in the document. And then last, we want to take a moment to talk to you about local preference, which is a topic that often come up. And I'm going to ask Lily Thomas from Marin County to just say a few words about local preference.
Thanks, Joan. This is something that we hear about frequently, asking for local preferences so that any housing, especially housing for lower income folks, could serve people who are already in the community. And this is a common thing that people hear around the state and probably around the country when you're developing affordable housing. Unfortunately, given Marin's demographics, the fact that Marin County is so much wider than the Bay Area, if we had a local preference on housing in our communities, it would likely have the unintended consequence of keeping people out and furthering the patterns of segregation in our communities. And so, we've had in the past some concerns that have been raised from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, who is one of our funders around these issues. And so Marin County, we will not be seeking any local preferences within the affordable housing in our community. There's a couple of small, narrow carve-outs that are different. One of those is for ag workers. And there's some state law that allows people to set aside housing specifically for agricultural workers. And another is if a school decides to develop housing on their own property, they can have housing that is specifically for their teachers and staff. So there's some small carve-outs, but typically, given Marin's demographics and compared to the Bay Area as a whole, that is not something that we will be looking into further. Thank you, Joan.
Okay, thanks for explaining that for us, Lily. So now we're going to move forward into getting your ideas as we move through the program topics. Veronica will be giving a brief explanation, and then we do want to hear from you, your thoughts and ideas on these different program ideas. I see a hand up. We're not going to be taking verbal comment. We're going to be relying on the chat. And there was also a question that was sent to me. The PowerPoint will be posted on the county's website. All of the materials related to the housing element process have been posted there. So you can submit your comments specific to that program ideas. If you have additional ideas within that topic area, we'd love to hear them. And then with each topic, we're going to ask you to weigh in and provide, we're going to be using a tool called Mentimeter, and it allows you to to answer on a scale of 1 to 5. And the idea is that if it's 5, you think this is a program idea that should be further developed by the county. And if it's a 1, it's an idea you don't think is right for Marin County. And then there's somewhere in between. 3 is good for neutral or not sure. So we'll be looking to see your responses somewhere between 1 and 5. So now we're going to get you familiar with Mentimeter. So you should see the Mentimeter link in the chat. If you're someone who maybe has an extra device, you're on your laptop and you have a smartphone, you can use both. Just go to the Mentimeter and put in the code. You can also use a QR code if you have a mobile device with that feature, and that will take you right to Mentimeter. So we're going to be using this tool for the remaining portion of the meeting. So I will give you a moment to get connected to Mentimeter. So let's see, making sure that we have our link ready to go. And so hopefully people are getting connected to Mentimeter. And with that, Joey, why don't you give us our test question. So the first one is just to get you going, and I can see some people are already in there. What's your energy like today? So on a scale of 1 to 5, are you tired? Long day, you're at a 1, or maybe you're someone who just got back from a workout and you're fully energized, and we'll try and keep the energy up through this meeting. What Mentimeter does is it gives us this average that you can see, but it also shows us the distribution. And so we have a much clearer sense of, what is the span of opinion and where are the numbers concentrated. And again, so the Mentimeter code is right up, it's on every single slide. Menti, and then here's the code number. So we'll give folks just a minute, and then we're going to go to our next slide. So Joey, why don't you take us to the next slide? Okay, and Veronica, so on each slide, there should be 2 or 3 program ideas. We are asking you to consider them each individually. We've just put a couple on the same slide for efficiency so that we don't have, an excessive number of slides. Veronica is going to give you a brief description. The chat is on, so if you have any comments about these policies, these program ideas, put them in the chat. So Veronica, let's model how we want to do this and get us started with the first 2 program ideas.
Great. This is relating to increasing the availability of existing units, and these options are directly responding to the needs assessment, the survey, and also comments that we received during all the public meetings. One being short-term rental policies. How are we going to regulate that? There are different options to do that, like prohibiting that. Setting it, benchmarking it to a certain amount of your overall rental housing stock, requiring some kind of registration or paying a fee in order to collect money that can be used to provide affordable housing. These are some of the ideas for rental housing and short-term rental housing policies. So whether you want us to further develop it or not. Another idea is a relatively new concept called vacant home tax. There are some jurisdictions that are enacting this right now. I think San Francisco is looking for it, and I think maybe Seattle has it. Definitely Vancouver, Canada has it. That is to charge property owners for a home that is sitting vacant for a certain period of time in order to discourage units that are being left unused.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. So we have a couple of comments here in the chat. We have a couple of folks that want to get rid of short-term rentals. We have a comment that Oakland has a vacancy tax and they earned $7 million last year, and that San Francisco is considering it. let's see, the person who, the Menti code is, it'll be on the slide as soon as we go to the Menti slide. So you'll see it in just a moment. We have a suggestion to do what the Sausalito houseboats do, make them 30-day rentals. And please give separate answers for each idea. We have a suggestion to look at underutilized industrial and commercial spaces. Look for some creative ways to obtain the land or buildings with the cooperation of owners so that pre-project costs can be minimized. Let's see. And remember, we're not asking you to choose between these two ideas. When we go to the polling, the Mentimeter you'll be able to comment on each one. So we have more comments about limiting short-term rentals. Let's see. Okay, we need more single-level housing for our aging community. Comment about code enforcement for less than legal ADUs getting amnesty. So that's another idea for increasing the housing tax. A question about the vacancy tax being enforced. We can't answer that right now, but that would obviously be part of what needs to be done. And a few additional comments about getting rid of short-term rentals. And then a final comment there about short-term rentals and let's see, a comment there about conglomerates purchasing vast amounts of housing in West Marin. And so the county needs to enforce residential zoning. So let's go to the Mentimeter slide. And just a reminder, everything that comes in the chat will be downloaded. So if I don't read every word of all the comments, know that the team will see them. So you have your Mentimeter code up here at the top. And so now what we're asking you to do is on a scale of 1 to 5, if you do not want the county to further develop a short-term rental policy, stay at 1. But if you think it's necessary, it's something that the county should be considering and further developing, please put your answer in the 4 or 5 range of the spectrum. The same thing with the vacant home tax. Consider each idea individually. And again, if you don't think it's a good idea, give us a 1. If you think it's something they should consider, then by all means go towards the 4 or 5. We did get a question about an ADU. That's an accessory dwelling unit. It's also called like a granny unit. And so there's a number of comments here in the chat. So I think we've got a good amount of feedback from this and a real span of opinion on the short-term rental policy and also on the vacant home tax. So thank you. So this is how we're going to walk through. We have about 18 of these statements to do. So that's our first grouping of policy statements. So Joey, please take us to the next group. Okay, so Veronica, why don't you talk to us about the tenant protection program ideas?
As we mentioned before, the housing element certainly has to look at promote further fair housing, and certainly providing tenant protection is important. Currently, state law does have a rent cap policy, which is extended to 2030. But it doesn't cover everything. We cannot cover everything, but at least at the state's program, it doesn't cover single family homes or duplex, and it also does not cover units that are recently built, basically recently built within the last 15 years. So an idea about tenant protection is, should the county create its own rent stabilization ordinance that can expand the number of the type of housing units that are covered under the rent stabilization and make it permanent? And is that something that the residents would like to see? Just cause for eviction. This is the policy that that limits the causes that a landlord can rightfully evict a tenant. And currently, the county does have a just cause for eviction ordinance. But it only covers residential buildings that are 3 or more units. It doesn't cover anything below that. So the idea is to expand the just cause for eviction program to include single family and also duplex, and certainly ADUs as well.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Veronica. So let's see some comments coming in. There's a comment about a desperate need for affordable rentals in the county. Some comments about no rent control. Just some comments about managing traffic. So let's hear any comments related to the program idea to create a rent stabilization ordinance. And then also as it relates to expanding the just cause for eviction program. So we have a couple of no rent controls. We just had a yes rent control. So let's take another moment, see if there's any other comments. So let's go to our Mentimeter slide and see how this turns out. So if you think creating the county should further develop the rent stabilization ordinance, please, your answer is somewhere near 5. If you don't think it's a good idea, you're at a 1. And then also separate from that statement, consider if the county had a program to expand the just cause for eviction program. So beyond what it currently has. And if you don't think that's a good idea, give it a 1. And if you think it's something that should be further expanded, give it a 4 or 5. Okay, so we've had a number of people weigh in, and I think people can see the results on the screen as the answers are coming up. And also, as Joey just showed, we do get something a little bit more granular about where people are on the spectrum. So that one is a little past the middle, 3.4, 3.4, but we can also see that it's a real span of opinions there. So, and again, a few comments about rent control, it being weaponized, and we are sharing the poll results on the screen, so you should be able to see that. Okay. So let's go to our next grouping of topics. Okay, so Veronica, we have some additional AFFH related programs for tenant protection. Why don't you walk us through the next 2 program ideas?
Sure. When it comes to a lot of the regulations and policies, usually there are more from the lens of property owners, and certainly there are more property owners who are participating in making these kind of decisions. As we can see tonight, 81% of the participants are homeowners. And so what we have an idea about is create a tenant commission that can offer tenants, renters, a voice in the decision-making process and allow the tenants to come up with policies and programs that may be promoting their interests. And so that's one idea. The other idea is this concept of first right of refusal. There are typically 2 types. First right of refusal to purchase a unit. For example, if there is a condominium conversion, then the existing tenants would be offered the first right to purchase the units. They don't have to buy it, but they do have the first right of refusal. The other concept relates to first right of refusal are when a tenant is evicted or displaced because the landlord has to rehab, make improvements of the units, and therefore has to displace the existing tenants. The existing tenants has the first right to return back to the property when it's finished with the rehabilitation or improvements. So those are 2 ideas about additional tenant protections.
Okay, thank you. So let's hear your thoughts in the chat. So any comments related to the tenant commission, So a suggestion of why not a tenant landlord commission? Can't we discourage polarization? Okay, there's something for the county to consider. Why don't we go to the Mentimeter poll, and we can still have a few things come in through the chat. So if you think creating a tenant commission is a program idea you want the county to pursue, please go towards the 5 end of the range. And if you don't think the county should do that, give us a 1. And then we have another idea of providing first right of refusal. And as Veronica explained, so if you think that's a program idea for further development, please give us a 4 or 5, and then also a 1 if you disagree with that. So there's a couple of comments in just positive, comments supporting that the tenant commission is wise. Both ideas seem to promote justice. The county staff shared that they offer free landlord tenant mediation services through the Consumer Protection Unit. Okay, so so on the Zoom screen, you should be able to see the results of that. So, we're landing right in the middle, but we do have a broad spectrum of opinion, and then also the information that we glean from you that you submit through the chat, especially information that helps us understand why you think something should be further developed or why not. Okay, let's go to the next grouping. So now Veronica is going to share some program ideas that are designed to help support seniors. So she has 3 ideas that she'll talk through, and then we'll do the chat, we'll do the polling, and you're commenting on all 3. You are not just choosing your favorite. Okay, Veronica?
Great, certainly. Again, reminding kind of back to our needs assessment, there was a lot of concerns about having senior housing and senior options allow the seniors to age in place or to have options that they can move around or trade up or trade down. Now, one idea is to help seniors to age in place, maybe through some kind of a home match or roommate match program, to find seniors to share a home or to rent their ADUs and that they may have on their property. Another option is to increase assisted living facilities and opportunities within the county where we want to do that. And is that some kind of housing options that you think is needed in the unincorporated areas? And now this is also relates to, again, as a result of comments that provided by you, that senior housing options, smaller units, not necessarily just rental housing, but home housing that is for seniors, that may be for purchase, that could be like townhomes and also small lot subdivisions that require less maintenance on the senior. So these are some of the ideas for senior housing.
Okay, thanks, Veronica. And just a couple of comments. We have a suggestion of the county funding specific programs to create renter programs and support in Marin. The same thing would work for seniors. The nonprofits could do the outreach. Suggestion to expand rent subsidies. A positive comment, someone with experience with the home match program. An example where a young woman who lives in a home with a senior citizen, and that it came about through Whistle Stop. We have a suggestion for ADUs and tiny homes, an idea of seniors benefiting from a second unit on their property to generate extra income. Could a low-cost loan, streamlined permitting, and pre-approved plans for ADUs be made available for seniors? So there's an additional idea there. Suggestion to allow caregiver cottages and tiny homes. Senior housing subsidies like rent subsidies. Programs to help support seniors modifying their homes so they can stay in their residence. Provide more share co-housing projects, Some examples from Marin and Mill Valley Redwoods that are lovely senior communities. Then ideas to promote intergenerational housing through co-housing and small communities housed together in separate units with common areas. More suggestions of rent subsidies for low-income seniors. Let's see. So we have that matching with another senior will help low-income only senior communities with activities would be welcome. More on intergenerational co-housing. Comments on small lots, creating more senior homes. Yeah, so seems to be a lot of support for intergenerational housing, tiny homes. And let's see, there's a question related to splitting lots for seniors so they could get a family space but not have to take on debt from building a second unit. So thank you. We really appreciate all these comments and ideas. And just we got a clarification that co-housing is a specific type of housing. Someone clarifying that they might mean co-living. And we have an aging population to serve. So how about if we go to our Mentimeter question? And so on those 3 different ideas, tell us, which ones you would like the county to further develop. So if you think the home match program would be something positive for seniors, please weigh in and give that a 5. If you want the county to focus on policies that would increase assisted living opportunities. And then the same thing, same scale for if you think the county should create policies that would create small lot or townhome opportunities for seniors. And we have someone weighing in with a home match program, so we'll get that information from the chat. Okay, so I think people can see the results. So there seems to be a higher level of support for further developing these senior programs. But definitely, a few folks, they're on the other lower end of the spectrum, and we want to respect that, and we appreciate the feedback that we've received. So let's go to our next group of topics. And now Veronica is going to talk about some program ideas that respond to housing needs for farm workers.
Sure. The county and incorporated areas, we certainly have a lot of farming activities within the unincorporated areas, but a lot of them are small farms because they're berry farms, so it doesn't have the large scale kind of farm worker on each farm. But how do we provide affordable housing for farm workers? One idea is to work with the farm employers to help them contribute to an affordable housing fund or to contribute to a land trust for farm worker housing. The other idea, I think Lita mentioned before, that there are state law that allows jurisdictions to set aside a certain percentage of affordable housing for farm workers. Is that something that you would like to see? So these are 2 topics that we would like to get your comment on.
Okay, and I'd like someone from the county to weigh in. I'm curious if any of these have been tried in the county. So Jillian or Lily?
Oh yeah, so on the farm worker housing, we have a couple of examples of that. Both of them, are in Point Reyes. One of them is the Point Reyes Affordable Housing, which was developed by EAH, and there's a set aside for farm workers in that project. And then for the Coast Guard housing, that will be a collaborative with CLAM and Eden, the county will be requiring a set aside for agricultural workers and farm workers at that project. So this is something that has worked in the past.
Okay, and Lily, another question. The Marin County farmers are more year-round than seasonal. Is that correct?
Yes, it's my understanding that most of we have a lot of small dairies, and workers that are employed year round, rather than, in the grape industry, for example, where there's seasonal workers that come in and leave, but many of our workers are employed year round.
Okay, thanks, Lily. Okay, great. So we have a lot of comments coming in. We have a suggestion to ask the farmers what they want. Since farm employers are usually not in the business of providing housing, can we allow for master leasing of other units so nonprofits can provide decent and safe housing? Let's see. So just a comment that there are some dairy farms that supply free housing for employees and their farmers, and they need help upgrading housing on the farms. Okay. Let's see, and just a suggestion that we talk with the farm workers themselves to hear what would be best for them so they can participate in these policies. Let's see, and just some comments about farm workers living on site. They're our most essential workers and should be protected. Okay, some ideas in support of that. A suggestion of amending the Williamson Act to allow farmers to create housing for non-farm workers. Let's see, just encouraging farm worker affordable housing, perhaps forming a village with adjacent farms. So you would have some community with the families and children near each other. It might benefit farm workers to have the option to keep housing when their employment ends. Okay. Since farm workers may be less whites, let's welcome them into the new housing too, not just push them into farms only. Another suggestion to talk to the farmers. Let's see, the point of farm workers living on site is that there is no commute. Okay, suggestion to change the 60-acre zoning. Yeah, and again, reinforcing talk with our farm workers and get them involved in the conversation. So with that, let's go to the polling slide and let us know about your ideas for further developing these policies. And again, with the caveats and suggestions that have come in about engaging the farm workers and the farmers in the further development and implementation of these policies. Okay, so I think we've got a good number of responses here, and we seem to be on the higher end. So this is a topic where it looks like we have more people encouraging the county to further develop these policies. Okay, and we'll just give it just another moment here. So you should be able to see the results on the slide. So we're somewhere around 3.9, and as you can see the chart, it's a kind of a sloping increase up towards further development. Okay, let's go to our next group of topics. So Veronica, why don't you tell us about some of the program ideas to help meet the housing needs of people with disabilities?
Certainly, having the ability to live in an area or have a home that is barrier-free is important. So providing assistance to accessibility improvements may be a concept. Accessibility improvements may be wider doors, bathroom that has grab bars, or then homes that you need to install ramps. So those are some of the accessibility improvements to homes that may be important to persons with disabilities. Now, the other idea is to process something called reasonable accommodation, and certainly expedite the review of that. Sometimes when you do home improvement, when you live in when you build certain housing as well, it may not be feasible to meet all the development standards and in order to accommodate your special needs, and therefore there is a process to request a reasonable accommodation to accept you or to relax the requirements in order to provide to accommodate your disabilities. that process may take a little bit of time, so expediting that review may be important. So whether that is something that you think is needed in the county, that's what we would like to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. So we have some comments about meeting the housing needs of caregivers and in-home health support workers. So let's see some comments on Airbnbs. Okay, so there's a couple that are from some previous topics, but we will get all of that information. A comment about expedited review being extremely important since so many of our projects get bogged down in bureaucracy. So why don't we go to the polling question, and we, still have time for some additional comments to come in. So on a scale of 1 to 5, let us know if you think the county should further develop these policies, or if they're not appropriate and they shouldn't put the energy into them. Okay, so it looks like we're in the 4 to 5 range for a lot of participants who are weighing in on Mentimeter. And if you just joined us, the link and the code is in the chat, so you should be able to participate. We have a few more slides like this and some program ideas. Okay, so let's bring this to a close. And as you can see, this is an area where there seems to be a fair amount of support for the community, for the county to further develop these program ideas. Let's go to the next grouping of policies. And so we have 2 additional program ideas to meet the needs of people with disabilities. So Veronica, why don't you tell us about these 2 program ideas?
Sure. Universal design is a principle in terms of design. This is to design residential buildings and environment in such a way that is accessible not only to persons with disabilities, but to persons of all abilities and all ages. That is certainly something that allows somebody to age in place when you live in it. When you're younger, you're all able, you can continue to live in it and without modifications, because the building or the environment is designed in such a way that would accommodate all ages and abilities. The other a little bit more limited concept is this concept of visitability. Visitability is again an environment or building that is designed in such a way not only to accommodate the person who's disabled living in it, but also accommodate people who may be disabled to visit this particular location. So it would cover some of the common areas and also from parking to the building, that making sure that somebody who is disabled can travel from one location to another location within a residential development. Now, currently, visitability is a requirement for some of the state or federally funded projects or housing, but it only covers primarily single family units, but it doesn't cover multifamily. And so what we would like to hear from you is, do you think this kind of requirement should extend to multifamily?
Okay, thanks, Veronica. And again, if you have other ideas, please drop them in the chat. We have a comment about someone wondering if we need to expedite opening possibilities for alternative co-housing. And they're talking about the deadline to decide by November, December. A comment that aging people may likely be temporarily disabled at some point. We all need housing policies to help us as we age. We have a comment that all new construction has to be built with ADA and accessibility regulation in place. It's the old buildings where it's problematic. Comment, this presses for more single-story housing units for both rental and purchase. And then multifamily housing. Veronica, if you could just say a little bit, what does multifamily housing include?
Usually multifamily housing includes structures of 5 or more units. Certainly that's typically the state definition of multifamily housing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have some comments that multifamily is already governed by ADA and universal design guidelines. Would these programs do more than that, or maybe we can help clear that up?
I don't believe currently there is universal design requirements in or even programs within the unincorporated areas. That's the reason why we offering the first option is how to incentivize universal design. Universal design does add to the cost of housing development or construction, and therefore incentivizing it may be an important tool.
Mhm. Okay, thanks, Veronica. Um, let's see. And just a comment, seems like five or more units would be built by a developer or managed by a property owner who can reasonably handle ADA compliance. And then just a question about housing for people with developmental disabilities, and are there plans for independent or supported living options? Okay, well, thanks for those comments. So let's go to the Mentimeter poll and let us know your thoughts on the county's, some direction for the county if they should further develop programs that provide incentives for universal design as it was described, and then also policies that would help that are related to visitability requirements for multifamily housing, making sure that the common areas and other related features are accessible. So let's see where we land on this one. Okay, we have a good span of opinion, a little bit past 3. But I think you can see from the results, we have a lot of different opinions on that, and we appreciate everything that has been dropped in the chat. Okay, let's see, let's go to our next grouping. Okay, so Veronica, if you could describe programs to help increase housing support for people experiencing homelessness.
Sure. One of the a major direction in terms of providing housing for the homeless or addressing homelessness throughout the nation is the idea that you put them in permanent housing, and housing first is that concept. And to do that, a lot of jurisdictions right now, the state and the federal government is providing a lot of funding for converting hotels and motels into permanent housing. That's called Project Home Key in California, certainly. And is that an idea that you think we should further explore? And is that something that you think the county should expand funding into? With that, I just want to emphasize that we do have hotels and motels throughout the county and in the unincorporated areas, but this program would focus only in the areas where it's outside of the coastal area. Rapid rehousing is another option. What rapid rehousing is if somebody becomes homeless, what you want to do is provide support and maybe rent subsidies and security deposits and any type of assistance that would transition that person rapidly into a permanent housing situation so that they're not left homeless for an extended period of time. Research has already shown that the longer they remain homeless, the harder it is for them to become to be rehoused. Another option about providing housing for the homeless, I think somebody mentioned that before in the chat, is tiny homes. Tiny home villages are some of the alternative housing types that are being explored or used to house the homeless. So we want to get an idea from you whether that is a good option for the unincorporated areas.
Okay, well, thank you, Veronica. So we've had a couple of comments come in, making sure that any programs for the chronically homeless must require substance abuse or mental illness counseling. So making sure those support services are there. Just a comment, that's what's happening for the homeless right now is not working. A mass majority of the homeless suffer from mental health challenges. We used to have permanent housing for people in hospitals. We should do that again. Let's see. And then we had a suggestion with the county sharing that they already support housing for people with developmental disabilities. Okay, so that was from our previous section. So other comments related to ideas for meeting the needs. Let's see. Oh, and just a question about how to do tiny homes in areas where there's limited septic capacity. So that would definitely have to be taken into account. We want to help alternative housed individuals remain in their communities. And then just a comment about tiny homes or private living quarters. They're a quick way to house people so we don't have tent communities that become a health hazard. And yeah, and just a comment, you know, that it's likely we don't have any homeless people on tonight's Zoom. We have been reaching out to the community-based organizations who provide services. So we have been working to get those opinions in here. We have a comment about job trading and work placement program to house homeless where they can have employment. Let's see. Comment about decriminalizing compostable toilets. And then just more comments and questions about tiny homes being allowed. It could be a good option. A suggestion about keeping in mind water limitations, drainage, solar electricity, assistance, sustainability. And just a comment on someone who has experience providing services to homeless people and how a lot of services, day treatment and substance abuse, a lot of programs were defunded by previous administrations. We have more on tiny home development to cover senior, disabled, and homeless populations, make the permits temporary and revocables so we can provide stability. And then there is a question about Project Home Key. I'll have someone in the county answer that. And just some more comments on tiny homes. So let's go to our Mentimeter poll and see how people feel about these different project ideas. Okay, so support for Project Home Key being further developed, put that on the 4 or 5. Support for the rapid rehousing options, again, put that on the 4 or 5. Further developing the ideas related to tiny homes and some of the alternative housing types, put that on the 4 or 5. And again, if you don't think those are good ideas for the county to pursue, then you would be giving us a 1. So yeah, let's just show the results here, Joey, to see kind of what the span is on the different ideas. 4.3 on our next one, rapid rehousing, again 4.3, and then our third one we're at 4.1. And I think that takes us through our polling. So Joey, do we have any more in terms of special needs opportunities? Okay, so that is the end of the Mentimeter polling. So I'm going to take you back to our presentation, and this is the final grouping of program ideas. Scott Davidson from MIG is going to walk you through these. These are required, so we're not going to be polling on them because the county has to further develop these program ideas. We are welcome to receive your comments. So Scott, why don't you tell us about some of the required programs?
Thank you, Joan. California cities and counties struggle to produce the housing called for in their housing elements, in particular affordable housing. To address some of the challenges communities face, the state has adopted laws that streamline the permit process by limiting development review, identifying circumstances under which housing is allowed by right, and incentivizing the production of affordable housing through density bonuses and relaxed zoning standards. I'm going to take a brief minute to describe some of the key constraints the housing element must address and tools and practices that could be considered. Under certain circumstances, housing development must be allowed by right. For instance, if a site was identified in a prior housing element as a location where the county would satisfy some of its housing need for lower income households and no housing is built. If an application is filed that includes some number of affordable units, it is then approved by right. One way to avoid that circumstance is to offer additional incentives for affordable housing production to increase the chances that the RHNA housing obligations will be met. The county is considering use of an affordable housing overlay zone to provide incentives above and beyond those established by state law for building more affordable housing. This tool can also be used to allow housing on property where housing is not normally allowed. Existing housing laws also require the county to streamline the development review process for projects with 2 or more residential units. Specifically, such projects can only be regulated by objective standards, and there is a limit on the number of hearings a project will go through. In response to this change, the county is planning to establish objective standards that address design objectives. These are some of the constraints and considerations that the housing element must address while striving to identify tools that best respond to community needs. We look forward to hearing other ideas as part of this workshop. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you, Scott, for giving us a quick review of those program areas. Well, we've gotten through a lot of material with you today, and we really appreciate everyone's participation. We know we've been a little bit demanding in terms of, Zoom and the additional tools. We've gotten some great participation through the chat. We are a little bit ahead of schedule. So for those of you who would like to share program ideas. So first we want to get your ideas because the county staff have, a fair amount of work to get the policies developed for the housing element. And if you would like to verbally share some program ideas, please raise your hand. We'll take you off mute and you'll be able to speak. We have over 100 people on the Zoom. So when you talk, if you could keep it to a minute or less, we'll get your program ideas. If you have additional questions, you can send them in through the chat and county staff will continue to answer them as they have been. So let's start with some comments and it'll just take a moment to get you off of mute. So our first commenter, Albert Strauss. So what program ideas do you have?
So in light of the research that states that corporations and conglomerates are buying up housing in West Marin for short-term rentals that are not residential, that are residentially zoned and used as commercial properties, I feel there's a lot of cities and counties along the coast that are putting in limits on short-term rentals. Sonoma County is looking at 10% of the housing stock. Long Beach did a limit and got through the Coastal Commission. San Diego is doing it. Many counties and cities along the coast are doing that. So my request and request and observation is we need to get our housing stock for residences and people living in our communities before we lose them all.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Albert. Thanks for your comment and idea. We have a couple more things that have come in the chat about, let's see, some infill over shopping centers that are already in transportation hubs. There was a question about more inclusionary housing. We have some ideas on working with environmental health to allow for prescriptive septic design for set geographic areas, allow for shared septic systems for permanently deed restricted unit development, and an idea about changing flows to be reflective of the 65 gallons per day per bedroom now that we have low flow fixtures. Okay. Let's see. There was, and maybe Lily can answer this through the chat, just some clarification on local preferences. Just an idea for the county to buy some lots and put tiny homes on these. Okay. Do we have any other comments or program ideas that people would like to speak and have their comment expressed verbally? Okay, we have Annabelle Scott is the next person to comment. So Annabelle, what are your program ideas? We'd love to hear from you. And in just a moment, you'll be off mute. There you go.
Hi there. I thank you all so much for being here. This has been super informative and really a jam-packed session, and I appreciate the time and effort that's gone into making it possible. I'm wondering if there will be an in-person opportunity for folks to weigh in on some of these issues. The forum felt, I was just noticing in the chat, some of it felt a little inaccessible to have the multiple screens and review the chat and try to respond and think of something to say. I myself felt like we were moving really, really quickly and would love to be able to help facilitate something in person. If I'm not aware of it being scheduled, I apologize. But that's my question. And then on programs, I just would encourage communities or the county to continue to support programs like the Bolinas Pilot Septic Program, which is allowing low-income homeowners to expand their existing septic systems and permit them. This is just launching for us, and we hope we'll have a pretty great impact in our community.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your comment, Annabelle. The next opportunity for comment on these is at the Board of Supervisors meeting on April 12th. We are going to take a moment and share the digital whiteboard that we have been taking notes on. And you can see some of the full range of comments that might stimulate some additional ideas. And so we're going to have Joey zoom in a little bit so you can see some of these ideas for ways to increase the availability of existing units. And so again, what came in through the chat, we've been able to collect it all. And I do agree, that was a fast moving chat at some times. So I agree that this has been quite an active meeting, and we really do appreciate the level of participation that we've received. Joey, let's just do a quick review of the mural. So that was to increase existing units. And then we have some of the ideas for tenant protections, whether it was rent control or the tenant commission. So these were the comments that came in. And again, we did read off as many as time would permit as we were going through these. So we'll give you just a moment to scan these. Okay, and there's still, again, we're still taking comments and questions through the chat. Joey, why don't we go to our next grouping? So then when we talked about how to support our seniors with housing programs, So we had a number of ideas, ADUs, tiny homes, caregiver space, intergenerational co-housing, and just some different ideas, rent subsidies that would um, help make it easier for seniors to have affordable places to live. Okay, so there's some of the senior ideas. Let's go to our next group. Okay, and this was our conversation about housing for farm workers. So, you know, I think as it was stated by the county, many of the Marin County farm workers are here year round. There were some suggestions of checking in with the farmers, with the workers to find out what would meet their needs the best. And then just a few ideas there. And there's a question about, will these screenshots be shared? We can provide these to the county for posting and create them in a format so they're readable, because it is one large whiteboard. Okay, now we're moving to our special needs population. So ideas to support people with disabilities. Some comments and questions about ADA regulations. Can we take care of the caregivers as well? Let's see, how we can expedite things. So a few questions about definitions, and I hope that people received that through the clarification offered by Veronica and also the county. Comments on new buildings versus old buildings, with the older buildings being problematic. Support for expedited review so that things can happen faster. Again, there's some comments still coming into the chat. We're going to continue to receive them and accept them. And then let's go to our next grouping, Joey. And so these were the ideas for meeting the needs of people experiencing homelessness, and, you know, a few comments that some things aren't working very well currently, but lots of ideas related to alternative housing, tiny homes, making sure that we do speak with homeless people to get an idea of their needs. Some comments about many of these individuals also really needing services, whether it be mental health counseling or programs and service related to substance abuse. And again, just a variety of suggestions about alternative housings, tiny homes, but also keeping in mind that we have limitations with water, drainage, electricity, and such. So with that, that's just a kind of a high level overview, but just wanted to confirm and validate that we have received all of your information. And we do want to see if there's any more comments or questions. If anyone wants to comment verbally, please put your hand up and I'm happy to recognize you. And again, some questions we'll continue to answer through the chat. Let's see, I see a hand up, Phil Sauter. So if you'd like to comment next, your program ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but it seems that, you know, we are pretty well represented by long-term residents of the unincorporated area, a lot of seniors here. I think that we have all moved through various stages as far as our housing needs. And so far, it seems in the 40 plus years I've lived here, we've never said that we've had enough affordable housing. It doesn't seem to be a problem that the market wants to solve. It almost seems like an issue that an agency, maybe the county, has got to step in and help to solve. Our needs change during our lives, and sometimes we buy a small house when we come here because it's all we can afford, and then some of us have families and we need bigger houses, and then later in life we need smaller houses and we want to, you know, live with more people. but we want to stay in the community. And it seems to me that somehow the county it might need to take a more active role in helping to create some flexibility in houses, building housing itself, and making sure that people can transition from one type to another, but not necessarily be in the same 5,000 or 4,000 square foot unit the whole time we're here.
Mhm.
So I really think that solving a problem like that could turn out to be a huge government program and require some more study as to understanding the various phases of life that county residents move through and how we can accommodate them and make sure they have a place that meets their state of life right at the moment. I'm not sure how to do that, but housing is so permanent and our needs change over time, but the house doesn't change. So I guess I'm not stating that very well, but somehow I think it needs to be looked at
Mhm.
by the county and maybe not rely on what developers are willing to do and actually cause the county to get into the housing business, which seems kind of weird to say that, but to solve that problem and be responsive to our needs at all stages of life, it seems like the county might have to be more active in that process.
Okay, well, thank you, Phil. Thanks for that suggestion of more active participation by the county in helping to create some of the housing as you were describing. Eileen Wolf, you are our next commenter.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for holding this. It's really well done, and I really appreciate that. I'm concerned about a couple things. First off, first question is, how are things allocated? I get that there might be a decision, or there has to be a decision made, and all the things that go into making a decision. But I'm concerned about, the fire risk that seems to be ongoing, and how people would evacuate if there was a fire. Even now, that would be very difficult. So to add a number of homes, and I know everybody's concerned with this, we all agree on this, but so I don't know what the infrastructure would be and how things would change. It just seems to invite a lot of congestion. I'm completely in favor of affordable housing, but how does the county play into it? I mean, in terms of funding, when we talk about, or when you talk about picking a site for affordable housing, how does that work? I mean, does the county have its own money to pitch in? I'm sorry, I must have missed that in an earlier meeting.
Mhm.
So those two basic concerns, because I, for one, am not, I don't want to give up any of the land that is everybody enjoys so much. Not that I own it, obviously, but the land that we all enjoy. And I really appreciate that Flanders and the golf course is no longer a consideration, so I think. But how is this all going to come about? Where's the county's role in terms of finances? So those two things. And then thirdly, I guess, real quick, is I've noticed, at least I live in Woodacre, there's a lot of wood smoke and things like that. And there was a county rebate plan if people were willing to convert their wood stoves to something that wouldn't pollute the valley as much or pollute just the air generally. And a lot of people weren't able to take that option, and the air is still very polluted at night. And so these are concerns I have.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you, Eileen. I know the site selection questions, those topics will be addressed at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And I'll ask maybe someone from the county to weigh in on the funding related comment, how that works.
What about the fire
And
risk?
then we'll follow that with fire. So, okay, well, thanks,
Yeah.
Eileen. We'll give the county staffs a chance to respond.
So Eileen, it sounds like many of your questions are really related to sites, as Joan pointed out. So we would suggest that you join the meeting on Thursday or the meeting on the 12th, where we'll be going that in depth. Affordable housing is typically funded through a variety of both state and federal sources, including tax credits. There's a number of state funding sources, as well as a local county housing trust that's used to kind of leverage that funding for affordable housing. And anything associated with fire or any other kind of infrastructure needs would be studied through the environmental review process that will be talked about more when we're discussing sites.
Yeah, and again, for anyone who has additional comments, the housing element email that was shared in the beginning, and we can drop it back in, is is available. So we can share that, and then we'll have some information about upcoming activities. Let's see, and the county has some information about a meeting coming up on March 31st, specific to the Novato-Atherton area and San Geronimo Valley. So the information's on the county website, and you can register there. So do we have any other program ideas? Anyone want to speak? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other hands. I appreciate everything that has come into the chat. So we're going to go to our final slides, and it looks like we're going to wrap up a little bit early tonight. So in terms of our next steps, just a reminder that April 12th, Board of Supervisors Joint Planning Commission meeting will be talking about the site selection process and also programs and policies. So it's going to be a very robust meeting. And then the document that has the draft policies and programs. So that will be in public draft, and it'll appear in the public draft of the housing element, and that will be available for public review and comment this summer. Here is the web link, the website address where all of the information and details about the planning process are contained. And you can also sign up for updates to make sure that you're kept up to date on any activities that are happening. We're going to save everything that we've gotten in the chat. And with that, I am going to turn it to Lily Thomas for some closing comments.
I think Jillian's going to give the closing.
Oh, Jillian, I'm sorry. Okay, Jillian.
That's okay. Thanks, Joan, and thank you all for participating. We really appreciate your commitment to being involved, your community, and I hope the workshop was useful and provided you with an opportunity to tell us what's important to you. We will include these comments in our recommendation to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, who will have the ultimate decision about what's included in the housing element. Your input is valued and important, and if you have other ideas, please share your feedback and insights with us. We look forward to hearing more from each of you. Thank you and have a good night.
Okay, well, thank you, Jillian. And the materials from this workshop, the presentation, the PowerPoint, the recording will be posted on the county's website. So it does take a little bit of processing to get them on there. We will download and save everything that's come in through the chat. And again, we appreciate your participation. I want to thank our speakers, Veronica, and our county staff who were answering questions throughout, and then also our technical support from Joey and Anna. And most importantly, your attendance, participation, and feedback. So thank you, and we're officially adjourned for this evening. Good night.
Thank you.